and experiencing like my gender, my identity be so viscerally reacted to by other people in my community, and how that made me feel, and how I saw other individuals who were experiencing the same thing react to, that as well. So think about the work that you do, think about how you show up in space, think about the lives and, the identities that you fight for, and picture the person that you were, and then picture the person you've become and all the work that you had to do. And I just want y'all to focus on appreciating all of those things that you had to go through, that you've had to experience to become the person that you are today. So I would say take, about 30 seconds, do some mental backtracking, do some appreciation. And once you do that, once you center yourself upon where you are now and where you were before, take that intention and take that feeling that, started this journey, whether it was when you were 5 years old or 15 or 25 or 52. I don't think anyone's 52 in here, but if you are, that's also amazing. Take that time, reflect, and then focus and hone in on that original feeling that took you and drove you to be the person you are today, and active some more, creating.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Thank you.
Meida.
Thank you.
We're going to give it one more minute and then we're going to start. I'm just going to put the link in case anyone didn't register into our story.
So we do have a good amount of people on here. There's still some people coming in, but I can go over the Zoom housekeeping, if that's okay. Yeah. So welcome everyone who's already in the chat. It's really exciting to see all these people here. We're really excited to have you at Heaven Gallery virtually. So some Zoom housekeeping, which you all probably know, is to just please keep yourself on mute while the speaker is talking. Each speaker will get around 10 or 15 minutes to speak, and then there will be a few minutes afterwards for questions. If you'd like to ask the speaker more in-depth things about their talk, feel free to unmute yourself for the question at the end of this, the presentation. But if you feel more comfortable, you are more than welcome to enter those questions into the chat as they're speaking, and then either you can ask them afterwards or I can read them out as well. And this talk is also being recorded. I just want to let you know so that you're aware that it's being recorded, and we can hopefully share it as well later. So I'm going to start off the presentation with a quick land acknowledgement. So the city of Chicago and Heaven Gallery acknowledges it sits upon the ancestral homeland to the Anishinaabe, Council of the Three Fires, Ojibwe, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Mishkondawe, along with dozens of tribes who cultivated and molded the land to sustainably suit their needs since immemorial. So once again, thank you all for being here. We are so excited to welcome you to the International Women's Day virtual symposium. It is so exciting to see everyone here. I would like to introduce Alma Wieser. She's the director of Heaven Gallery and has been so for the last 12 years. She started a project called Equity Arts, in which the centerpiece of the organization is its equity framework that shifts power and addresses the lack of representation within cultural institutions. This policy requires that the board, including building tenants and staff, be a 60% BIPOC majority. And I'm going to pass it off to her to get things started.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. On this eve of International Women's Day, this is the fourth year that we've hosted this event that highlights women as vessels of power. This year's theme is Choose to Challenge. I love this theme because it resonates with the work that we all have been doing. This event was started by Heaven Gallery and now in partnership with Equity Arts. For those of you who don't know, Equity Arts is a placekeeping project aimed at creating restorative space to advance racial equity while cultivating and preserving the arts from displacement. We seek to liberate a historical artist-run property in Wicker Park where Heaven Gallery has been located for the past 20 years. The vision for this building is to create a multi-tenant social enterprise with holistic arts programming that is intergenerational and regenerative. This will be the launch of what we're calling the Chicago model for sustainable culture that uses a community land trust to protect the property's creative use and affordability in perpetuity. As many of you know, this project is very personal to me. This neighborhood is where I found community through house music at the Silver Room, and where Heaven Gallery would forever change the course of my life. As a leader in this community, I choose to challenge those who would say that it's over and that it's too late for Wicker Park when I am still here. I'm still taking space and building community through the arts, and we are still needed here. It is from this legacy of this creative labor that we have earned the right for self-determination. As the keepers of the culture, we must tell our story and deny the narrative of gentrification that speaks to the loss of authenticity and echoes colonial displacement. Equity Arts seeks to flip the narrative of exploitation to the arts and to BIPOC culture, to bring transformation through the power of the arts as a healer, teacher, nurturer, but also as an economic driver. As our city begins to reopen, the arts will play a key role in rebuilding our neighborhoods. And in this spirit of abundance, Equity Arts is bringing it back, way back to when the arts was our first communication and our first language, when the earth spoke through us and rhythm was our original breath. Today, we are taking it back to the divine feminine as an energy that has been with us since ancient times and that commands creation and manifestation. I am grateful today to present to you 5 generations of women change makers in the city of Chicago. Alexie Young, Keli Stewart, Meida Mcneal, Dorian Sylvain, and Zolita. Our first speaker, I have never had the pleasure of meeting until today via Zoom. Dorian Sylvain is a studio painter, muralist, art educator, curator, and community planner. She has led public art projects over the past 4 decades that empower community and expose children to art making. partnering with such organizations as the Southside Community Art Center, Hyde Park Art Center, National Museum of Mexican Art, DuSable Museum, Chicago Parks District, and the Chicago Public Arts Group. She has devoted her work to building the next generation of culture keepers. I love that. Here we go. Take it away, Dorian.
All righty, unmute myself so I can talk a little bit. And then I'm also going to share my screen in a moment, but I guess I wanted to just kind of start off with the idea of our prompt in terms of challenge. I think back to the decade, the era when I was born and when I was coming up. And I think back particularly in reflection to my mother, who was born in the 30s. And I was born in 1960. And in retrospect, I look at the difference in terms of opportunities. Gender roles were so strict in the 30s that I know for my mother, her career opportunities, if you can even call it that, for a Black woman, were so limited. Of course, racism played a great role in that also, but I think about what kind of a woman she would have been for not those restrictions, for those boundaries, you know, to be a secretary or a teacher or a domestic, you know, it just was very, very limiting. However, when I grew up in the 60s as a young girl, I saw the entire landscape or the backdrop for me was revolution. It was, you know, the civil rights movement. It was the anti-war protest. It was people breaking down the sexual revolution. You know, all of these things are part of my background, and these are the kind of ideas that have always echoed in my head. So when I was growing up, I didn't think about things such as, oh, I'm a girl, I can't do this, or I'm Black, I can't do that, you know. And so that backdrop gave me the courage just to explore what were my authentic interests. And I didn't have to fit into those kind of roles and norms. And so I'm very grateful. You know, I often say to people that we're just children of our times, right? And, you know, growing up in the 60s and 70s, I had a whole lot different messaging than my mother, who grew up in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I've just been really empowered by that as a foundation. So fast forward a few decades, when I was in my 20s, my mother was a type of woman who always put up whatever they were teaching at the YMCA, we took it, you know, whatever they were, you know, baton twirling, macrame, sewing, cooking, you know, what she was just very passionate about the idea of exposing us to different mediums, different communities. You know, I remember as a young girl going to the Chinese New Year's festival. And I mean, she was very adamant about taking us around the whole city and embracing the whole city. When I work with a lot of young people these days, it always strikes me as odd that many of these children have never left their communities. You know, they've never been to the lake, they've never been downtown, and don't seem to have much interest in it. Somehow they're in this kind of like very secure bubble of their community, which I understand. But on the other hand, I also recognize that it has put so many restraints and limits on them, because this city is amazing. It is so diverse. It has so much to offer. And so, you know, they're again just very thankful that as a young person, I understood the city. It wasn't foreign to me. It didn't feel like there were things I couldn't do or places I couldn't go. And that's hugely empowering. So as an educator, I'm constantly trying to promote those ideas of embracing your full city. You know, I have a deep and strong commitment and love for my neighborhood. I grew up in South Shore, and we lived there for 5 decades. Just recently I moved out about 10 years ago, and now I'm still on the South Side in the North Kenwood, Oakland neighborhood, but very active with the organizations there. And so I do understand love for community and the need for us to continue giving back to our community. And so through my teaching practice, through my public art practice, I try to reinforce those kind of ideas. I'm gonna throw my glasses on so I can see where the share screen button is, and just pop up some images of some things I've been doing these last 4 decades. Mostly this imagery will be more current work. Let's see, I think I have to go back to here. Sorry, I'm not, can everybody see it? Am I there? Yay. Okay, so, you know, again, just speaking to the idea of roots and the idea of community and the need for us to continue to give back, to make sure that we are building bridges for the young people. One of my big missions as an educator is really tackling what I call art education deserts. And even as a young girl, when I was in college, I had applied and received a grant to do a free arts program at the South Shore Library, because recognizing that there just really wasn't many places for children who are interested in art to go and learn art. So again, my practice is always trying to find bridges for young artists to come along and get experience and to kind of pursue their interests and their dreams. So this image real quick is on the 3rd floor of the Southside Community Arts Center. Arlene Crawford, Raymond Thomas, and I had submitted a proposal to do a sculptural piece at the Burnham Wildlife Corridor. And the Southside Community Arts Center was our community partner. And so they let us have the 3rd floor, which basically is a ballroom, to create this piece. So I was a lead designer on this. And just real quick, part of my background, my story is also in the Black theater. It really was one of the first places that I think I began to blossom as an artist. Back in the days, in the 1900s, we had a lot of theaters on the South Side. You know, we had the XBAG, the Experimental Black Actors Guild, ETA, Black Visions, Kaumba. I mean, we had a lot of Black theater going on. And I always want to cite it as a place in which I learned the most about collaboration, where I learned the most about coming together to create a singular piece. And so I worked primarily as a set designer back in those days. And so dealing with space, dealing with structure was always a big part of, it's still a big part of how I think. And so as the lead designer on this project, I was creating a lot of little models. I was, exploring how is this thing going to stand up in the wind and blah, 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 just a lot of little structural things. So this is a photo of me kind of, showing some of my ideas. This is a finished product. It's still up at the Burnham Wildlife Corridor. It's been up for 5 years now, which is great. I guess it's a bit of a testament to my design skills because it's still standing. It's still, structurally very solid. Flipping back to the Southside Community Arts Center, we did most of our design work right up there. As you see, we're working a lot on the mosaic details. This is an image of our team. BK Ellison is in the back. He was our lead carpenter on the project, and there's Arlene Turner and Raymond Thomas and myself posing in front of it. We also have a seating area right across from the sculpture. Part of what the intention of this project was to create gathering spaces along the bird and wildlife corridor. And so having areas where people can kind of sit and reflect and just kind of be with nature. It's amazing because this is really literally just steps away from Lakeshore Drive. But yet when you're walking along the corridor, you really are just transported to a whole nother, beautiful natural environment. And it's quite peaceful over there. So Arlene and I are painting some of the concrete structures that we have placed there. Okay, flipping to another project. This is, again, I mentioned I grew up in South Shore. And before ATMs and all that kind of stuff, the South Shore Bank, which is what this structure is, was really kind of, I would almost say, the heart of the neighborhood. They owned most of the mortgages, as they did with my family. And going to the bank was kind of a social experience, my mother went often to do whatever banking transactions she needed. And so it was really a very interesting space to meet your neighbors, to conversate with them. And it really kind of grounded that intersection of 71st and Jeffrey for decades. So what had happened is that the bank had closed. And at the point when I did this mural, it had probably been closed for about 5 years. And it was really looking terrible. And community blight is another one of my pet peeves, when you have these abandoned structures that just seem to just kind of disintegrate and implode practically. They become real eyesores. And what tends to happen, as we've all experienced in our neighborhoods, is that it just gets worse and worse and worse. So now people are starting to just plaster crap on it, and people are, hanging out, and it just becomes an attractor of more blight, of more, to me, emotional distress. And so I went to the owner and asked if I could paint the front of it. And so what I did is went out there, base painted the whole thing, painted right over all the crappy advertisements that had been plastered up there right across the glass. Did this almost 5 years ago, and then just painted something fresh and a little bit more interesting to look at than the condition it had been in. The bank still was closed years later. And so I did another art activation just this past year on the same bank. This time we painted over the mural you just saw, painted everything pink, and came out, invited 10 other professional artists such as Arlene Crawford, Raymond Thomas, Juarez Hawkins, Masaja Washington, and let me think, Arthur Wright, Candace Hunter. I mean, just really wonderful, profound, prolific artists. And basically it was just kind of like, just choose a space and do your thing, and so we activated the whole front of the building, and even turned the corner this time and did some work along the side. So it was really an awesome experience. And I went back to the bank again for a third time and did another activation because it's a lot of building. And so this I did last summer. I got some funding and invited 6 young artists to do like fellowships. So I was able to pay them for the summer. COVID had just shut the whole city down. So the original idea was to do a big mural and then have these artists work with me to render it. But because of COVID, there's just no safe way to go about it. So because I have like the best neighbors in the world, they allowed me to take over the backyard, and I created an outdoor studio. And each of the artists were given, as you see, a 4x8 panel of wood, and they created individual pieces speaking to the strength of women in South Shore. So here we had resurfaced the whole front of the bank building, because that's all glass behind there. And ultimately, this was our team. The three guys in the back are my sons. They have been working with me now for quite a while. And the ladies in the front are all the artists that created these pieces in the back. And so we call this the South Shore Sunlight Public Art Gallery. As you see, we even kind of like frame the pieces, and each artist did a little statement, and, you know, just as we would do in a normal gallery situation. Yeah, this is us having conversation in my backyard. I was working at the time, the panel you see back there, I was doing a couple of murals for the Forum Theater, one of Margaret Burroughs and one of Gwendolyn Brooks. And I mean, I had wood laid everywhere in the backyard. We were laying them against the porches. We were laying them against the walls. It was for real a bona fide art studio back there. The piece you see behind me is actually Gwendolyn Brooks, and here they are installed at the Forum Theater. The bottom part of the theater was really in bad shape, and my boys and I decided that we would also paint the bottom just to freshen it up, the ground level. And here's where two of my sons there, we were, you know, kind of getting started because it just looked terrible. And it's kind of like buying a new dress and having raggedy shoes. You know, I just couldn't not paint that part, you know, once they installed the murals there. And then this piece, because I do a lot of work in schools, and this piece was created, it was sponsored by BMO Harris, who after the civil unrest downtown had to board up quite a bit of their property, kind of checking time, because I know I can just like go when it comes to talking. So trying not to go over my time here. But this, what they did is they took the actual panels from the building and then gave it to myself and Jeff Phillips. We were co-designers on this project. Was able to use the DuSable Museum's roundhouse. If anybody's ever been in there, you probably recognize the physical space. And we were able to create these pieces with a brilliant group of young artists that work with UMedia, with the Chicago Public Library, UMedia. And so we did a couple of Zoom conversations with the students and really kind of let them have full reign in terms of what they wanted to talk about. But we did want them to be individual pieces, individual collages that we brought together to make one big piece. So our theme was a garden in a city, and which is, I think, the motto of Chicago, a city in a garden, something like that. And so what I did is that we laid out these panels, as you see it, 6 of them, and then I base painted it. Was kind of going toward the idea of the sunflower thing, but then decided to abstract it a little bit, kind of even make it feel kind of like digital of sorts. And then we had one meeting with the students where their collages had been printed out. We also had a table full of other images if they wanted to add to what they already started. And we just had a full day of creating these individual pieces and then actually completing the full mural. And recently, the Chicago Public Library actually installed this mural permanently in their downtown facility, which I thought was so super cool because they have got a top-notch, what's the word I'm looking for? Their collection of artists in the library is just amazing. And so to have this piece now permanently installed next to some of these other wonderful, wonderful artists and other art pieces was really a big deal to me. So, and then let's see what else. Oh, okay. There's over at Overton, I do a lot of work. Amanda Williams was leading a project that day around she was doing some poetry that she originally had wanted to do in the street, really, really large scale. But after some conversation, we decided to kind of downsize it And so I created all these letters out of corrugated cardboard, and we ended up just tracing them right on the sidewalk around the entire school. Overton is one of those schools that got closed down when Rahm Emanuel did that sweeping 50 schools. However, Guion Foreman and his organization, Emerald South, bought the building and has really turned it into a dynamic space that has become kind of like a cultural hub. So that was a really amazing day, just assisting Amanda Williams on this project. And I could go on and on and on, but I kind of have a feeling I'm there. So, I think really just, again, to go back to the idea of the prompt, I think that I've never really felt any sense of boundaries. Even as an artist, there's a lot of subtitles under there: curator, teaching artist, public artist. And to me, they all just kind of flow organically together. I don't think of them as individual practices. Again, going back to my roots in theater, I just wear a lot of hats because I have a lot of different interests. And I have a lot of different skills. Even as a set designer in my 20s, I was keenly aware that it was basically a white male dominated field, but it was what I was interested in doing. And because I had Black theater, I didn't have to compete, in that sense. I was able to find a comfortable home to really explore my interests and to develop stronger skill sets, and to develop some lifelong artistic relationships. And so indirectly, I was challenging these norms, but it was because I had the haven of Black community and Black theater to develop those kind of skill sets. And it remains my mission to help fortify those type of spaces so that other young artists can also come up through the ranks and find value in so many different facets of art. I always tell young people, sometimes they'll tell me, oh, I just like working with markers. I just draw. That's all I do. And I'm like, okay, then you need to go take a ceramic class. You need to go take a photography class. Don't limit yourself. Learn all these skill sets. Learn as much as you can. And you will find that one thing informs the other. There's many times when I'm working on even public arts projects where I'm pulling back on my theater set design, or I'm pulling back on my carpentry skills, or I'm, looking forward because I have a really broad breadth of skills that I can bring to the project. And so I always try to encourage young people to broaden themselves, and the value of being able to think. It's like being bilingual, it's like the value of being able to think wider, to look at their world as artists, even in a broader, bigger kind of format. So with that, thank you. I will pass it on.
Thank you for really speaks to the resourcefulness of women artists here in Chicago. Thank you for that presentation. Next, Meida Mcneal, who I've known for a while now. She's the director of Pop's Afro to the critical performance and public humanities. She also started Cultural Map in 2019, an online map, community archiving, and live program series that explores Chicago's Black social lineage from the Great Migration to the present across the city's south, west, and north sides. Meida also works for the Chicago Parks District as arts and culture manager that supports community arts partnerships, youth arts, cultural stewardship, and civic engagement initiatives across the city's park and cultural centers. She is currently running a Fill the Pot Abundance campaign. Please welcome Meida Mcneal.
Oh, thanks, Alma, and thanks for mentioning that campaign. Yeah, like we are digging into trying to build our legacy now as a and thinking about institution building. So yeah, my name is Meida Mcneal, and I'm going to talk to you today about the evolution of honey pot performance and the slow evolution, because we've been working together for about 20 years in different iterations. And so I want to talk to you about, as part of that challenge of kind of Black folks, Black women, and trying to kind of validate our presence, stand on the ways that we wanted to make our work, in ways that sometimes conventional theater or dance would not recognize as art, and that we've kind of built the way that we wanted to make our work over the years, and have ended up in this really interesting place that is bearing so much fruit in ways that we could not even anticipate when we started this work together as friends who just wanted to create together. So I'm going to share my screen and talk through that kind of evolution and a bit of some of the projects that we are working on. Okay. So Honeypot Performance, there are 5 members, myself, Abra Johnson, Aisha Jean-Baptiste, Jody Presser, and Felicia Holman are the 5 core members. And we have welcomed in the past year our newest ensemble member, Jennifer Lagaya. And as we think about this next stage of what we want to be. But we really make works at the intersection of critical performance and public humanities. Our projects typically take a couple of years to come into fruition. There is a phase of kind of community design engagements where we are kind of storytelling, moving, using all kinds of creative ways to engage around a topic, a theme, asking questions, interrogating, and then building up this kind of data source of stories that we will then go back into the studio and build a world around. And then on the back end, what has happened in the past 10 years is we've begun to think about that work as the foundation for the creation of new knowledge. So like, what could that be outside of the performance, a digital website, a programming series, a book, and so on. And we let the work kind of guide and lead us to what it is that we are entering into the historical register after the performances are completed. Our mission, like I said, we are really multidisciplinary. So, and really drawing on the gifts and talents of the folks who are in the room and making with us. So my background is in dance and theater and poetry. And so those things all come into the fore, and an ethnographic, and I also have been trained as an ethnographer. So all of those skill sets come into the things that I bring to the table. But amongst the rest of the group, we've got a DJ in our midst who now kind of acts as our like main kind of sound curator. and has started to build sound compositions that fill out the worlds of the works that we make. We've got other poets, sociologists, clinical therapists, and other creative skill sets that also come into the mix, and we try to draw on all of that as part of the works that we're making. This is just a little overview of kind of some of the works we've made in the past 10 years as we came into being in our third iteration as Honey Pot Performance. Prior to that, we were Thick Roots Performance Collage, and then did some work in the intermediary through a work called Ladies Ring Shout, which is the first one that is listed here. But each one of these works was really kind of beginning to tease out this method that or approach that we now have to all of our works, that, you know, we have this kind of question or theme that we start with, and then we begin to gather folks to kind of creatively design, engage around that, and then take that into the studio. And these works are covering everything from, so Ladies Ring Shout is kind of like a quality of life dance theater work for Black women. And Keli Stewart actually was part of the original circle of women who, it began just as a women's workshop, creative workshop, and we would meet, I don't know, periodically, weekly, monthly, something like that. And it was during that economic downturn in 2008, 2009. And we were just looking for ways to kind of like give voice to the challenges that so many of us were feeling, economic strain as Black women, and trying to voice that. So that was the beginning of that work. Some of the others in here are kind of exploring house music, more about the economics that often challenge us. Masking Her was a kind of speculative fiction tale that we kind of crowdsourced with, really was an intergenerational group of Black women who came to a lot of those workshops to help build out the characters in the world. So that's just an example of that. And a bit about this evolution and some of the, we've grown from that organic collective in the past 3 years, became a nonprofit, and are thinking about, you know, how do we build an organization that will outlast us? And how do we bring in the next generation of artists, creators, thinkers who are kindred souls, to work with us and then continue the work of Honey Pot Performance. We are also really thinking about, and I'm going to share a couple examples of some projects that we're working on, have worked on, that we're really thinking about documenting and preserving Black cultural heritage and community knowledge in all sorts of ways. And the most, an additional thing that has been part of this nonprofit growth is the idea that we want to also create kind of an incubator to support other artists of color. So we are, you know, providing resources to develop new work and thinking about how to incorporate other artists within the organization. Black feminist discourse is at the backbone of everything we do and has informed the creation from the beginning. These ideas about you know, wanting to acknowledge the stories of folks who have been marginalized, who we don't hear often, and to not just hear them, but to uplift their knowledge as expertise, and to create that value, to also value dialogue as being at the center of what we do. It's intimate building, community building through creative practice. Shared vulnerability, this idea of taking creative risks and always experimenting, iterating slowly together to get to the world that we are trying to create. and modeling that through the relationships that we have with one another and how we make the work with other folks. We really think a lot about how we design the experiences that people will engage in so that they feel welcome, so that they can be vulnerable in sharing stories and being part of the making of these works. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chicago Black Social Culture Map, which Alma mentioned. And this was a work that came out of Juke Cry Hand Clap, which was a performance we developed in 2014 at Manna Contemporary in Pilsen. We kind of built out at that point, it was like a wide open first floor. And so we built that out as a kind of juke joint, and had 2 weeks of performances and workshops about old school, new school house, thinking about and making it kind of intergenerational as well, thinking about how house music within it, we could hear and feel the earlier architecture and social practices of Black folks and culture as folks transplanted from the South to the North, and wanting to kind of tease all of that out, right? From the juke joint to the discotheque and club. And so this performance really marked all of that. Let's get past that. So this was kind of these activations with community in which we, low tech technology, like we just took cut up a map of the city and had these social parties over 6 months in which folks could come and kind of mark their stories, the places that they went to or that, family members went to. And it would invite all these really interesting discussions and debates about where places were, when, what DJs played, what was happening in the world at those times. And it really crosses from like the 1910s up to the present moment. What we've collected is over 350 spaces that mark different points in time in Chicago's Black social cultural landscape, and all built up of the stories and people who have kind of lived it and hold that knowledge. I'm going to show you some images just from that kind of the activation period during the performances. So this was one of the intergenerational workshops. This was kind of the next iteration of the work after the performances, thinking about what do we do with this data now, and deciding to make this kind of digital map that will hold all of these stories. And so we mapped all of that, made kind of 8 categories that all of these spaces fit into. So everything from discotheques to dens and lounges and taverns and juice bars and all those kinds of ballrooms, cabarets, and so on. And this was about 2 years into the process where we had got kind of the first layer of the map together, and we brought together kind of some OGs of house to kind of help look at and fact check a lot of what we were creating. We decided at a certain point that we had reached kind of a wall with the information that we had, what we were able to research or gather from the stories that people had shared with us up to that point. And so we began to create a live series so that we would move around the city and have programs that were highlighting different stories and spaces. So we did a program at the Westside Justice Center that focused on kind of blues and house intersections. Did one at Center on Halsted that focused on kind of Medusas and Black and brown and white kind of multiracial connections through house and tensions, and so on, things like that. And then we would also we collaborated with the Blackavists, who are a organization of professional archivists that yeah, and so we bought equipment and they came in and helped at each of these events to kind of, we asked people to bring in your photos, your stories, your fashion, all of those things. And we kind of captured, digitized those things so that we could put those into the map. And this is just some images from the panels and the archiving stations and work. Dwayne Powell and Ayana Contreras, who have been great collaborators. Stephen Booth there is one of the archivists. And this was like one of the teams that came together to do one program. So, you know, it's a lot of hands that do the work. Just some other images from programs. Did one at Silver Room last year or the year before pandemic. And then last year we decided that we, you know, adapted and took everything virtual. So we still held 6 programs. You can actually go to our website and find those programs there as we continue to work. This is Sojourner Scholars. We collaborated with them to think about like, how do we adapt this project to as a pedagogical resource and to connect young people to this history. So we visited local archives at some of the libraries. This was at the Carter Woodson and Regional Library. And we, you know, dug into those archives and tried to have those young people work with us to create some entries to contribute to the map. I'm going to switch real quick. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but I'm going to just talk for just a few minutes about another project that has come out of performance, right? So we have been selected as lead public engagement artists for this We Will Chicago initiative that the Department of Planning and DCASE and other city departments are working on. It's the first master plan that's being created for the city since 1966. And they are, the reason we wanted to get involved, it seemed promising, is because they, on the front end, are talking about moving very slow, about having a kind of 3-year process to build this plan and to have a lot of kind of community engagement and stakeholder input to make sure that it is people first and people driven as a plan. So we have thought a lot about like, we've been thinking so much about, there's a way that we make our work, right? And what is this method and how do we adapt it into other kinds of facilitation modes and thinking through difficult challenges and problems. And so this seemed like a really incredible opportunity to think about how the skill sets and the ways that we have worked at building kind of consensus, intimacy, collective knowledge, to do that on a citywide scale. So there are 6 pillars, and we will be having, well, actually a 7th was added, and I'll mention that one in a second. So housing and neighborhoods, economic development, transportation and infrastructure, environment, arts and culture, public health, and then they've added lifelong learning and education as a 7th pillar. But we're going to hire a team of artists and organizers to work with us to kind of imagine 7 different hubs across the city where we, for 3 to 4 months across the summer and late spring, are really engaging communities, other community experts and cultural stakeholders to think through these problems and challenges and the responses that some of the solutions that we see at the micro community level that often don't get noticed, to bring those into the fore and say, you know, some of these might be some of our answers already. How do we replicate that to kind of address some of these challenges in imagining a healthier city? Skip ahead. Our core questions: what do we want to keep? What do we want to change? What's urgent right now? We understand that, you know, so many are experiencing kind of planning and engagement fatigue. So how do we think about this kind of gathering and planning together like trying to imagine what the incentives are for folks to participate, and think about reciprocity. And then finally, we really want to position artists, organizers, residents, other local stakeholders as the experts in this work. And so finally, just as an inspiration for the We Will Chicago process for us, we have been kind of thinking alongside a project that I've been working on as a solo artist around Fifth City in the Garfield Park neighborhood, which is, there was a radical kind of community experiment in community-centered design and planning in the 60s through the 80s that my parents were part of. And then I had like a small archive of these planning documents and the memories of the stories they would tell me, the images I had burned in my brain of this Iron Man statue that sat in the square off of Homan and Fifth Avenue. And really remembering that as kind of this community-centered, vibrant remaking of a community, and wanting to draw from that, wanting to kind of take some of those learnings from the past and bring that memory work to bear fruit in the present. So we've been thinking a lot about how they did that work and how we can take some of those ideas, a lot of which are about kind of intimacy, scale, consensus building, collective knowledge, things that we have already been thinking about, but thinking about what are the ways that they have done that work that we can take some of those strategies and bring into this process. So I'm going to stop here on this frame that has kind of like those 5 values that they built with, that we are really thinking about building with now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Meida. I love this idea of collective community creating knowledge. I will say that I was at that Silver Room pop-up Black culture social map project that you had down the street. And I remember there was these great DJs, like a whole panel of DJs. It was, who was it? DJ Freak. It was Dwayne Powell was moderating, and Javon Jackson. And I remember there was a conversation outside amongst the DJs talking about how the culture was owed, specifically thinking about the development of Wicker Park and the music venues that were here that really brought the development and made people want to come to this neighborhood. So thank you for that work. It is so important. Next, we are going to be welcoming Zolita. Zolita is a Black, queer, trans woman born in Chicago, hailing from Wrightwood, with an overall mission to utilize music, performance, and organizing to deliver healing, strength, self-love, and pride to other QT POC. She is the co-founder of Molasses, a Chicago-based collective manifested by and for Black, trans, and gender nonconforming artists and organizers that aim to create both community and opportunity for Black, trans, and gender variant people and queer people of color through cultural work, coalition building, and linkage of self-care. Are you there, Zolita?
I am. Hello. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm gonna switch to speaker view. Amazing. So hi, I'm Zolita. As was said before, not my words not working. I'm an organizer with Molasses, a co-founder. I am also a couple other things in terms of performance, DJing, writing, all those great things. And I just wanted to chit chat a little about why Molasses and reformation and empowering of Black trans lives and livelihoods is something that we should all be discussing and invoking and, interacting with on a daily basis when we, navigate our daily lives until the points of also navigating our practices in everything that we do, really. I'm gonna switch the view. Sorry. Okay. So the precipice and the oncoming of Molasses was started within 2019 of March, which is so strange to think about that it's almost been 2 years since, creating this collective of Black trans individuals who are doing the work and doing the labor to create space for Black trans people to feel safe and seen and heard, which is something that has always been lacked in, spaces where queer culture, that is fundamentally Black, queer, and trans culture has been honed in upon, uplifted, and pushed out into the world. So spaces that, are in Boys Town, are in Andersonville, and so on and so forth, queer havens that, are sitting deeply within the roots of Black, queer, and trans culture, but don't really include those identities, those histories, those livelihoods, like uplifting those people. It's not something that we commonly see. And when we do see it, we see it being conditional. We see it being held above the heads of the individuals who are performing and navigating those spaces, and everything sort of being given and taken away very easily at the slightest, apprehension of the individuals owning and, taking control of these spaces, more often than not, white cis homosexual men. So Molasses was sort of the upturn to that, the middle finger to the individuals who hold onto these spaces, who, fear monger the hearts of Black trans people and tell them that they have to operate and show up in these specific ways, or that they can, not exist. And it is just that severe when we think about, the job prospects of Black trans individuals, especially Black trans femmes and women, who normally don't have places within job markets, who normally have to resort to survival tactics in terms to survive in their everyday lives. A high, percentage of us participate in sex work as well. And so when you think about the accessibility in terms of work and longevity and inciting vitality for Black trans women and femmes, we see them entertaining within queer nightlife to create the entirety of their, careers and stability outside of these vulnerable places where, they're acting out of survival. And Molasses has, in my mind and my experience, been so powerful for other Black trans people to experience, and so necessary. It has become very necessary very quickly for Black trans people to, be able to witness and be a part of, just because of the work that we do in terms of inciting mutual aid and redistribution of resources. And I'm gonna burp. I'm so sorry. And redistribution of resources and so on and so forth, which really has honed in and just incited this huge uplifting of community and grassroots organizing and coming together and utilizing and sharing the resources between Black trans individuals and between Black trans women and femmes specifically, which is another, point that I always love to point out, that, Black trans women and Black trans femmes are really the only individuals who are doing the work in impactful and substantive ways when it comes to living and invoking change within, our own missions for longevity and vitality, which is something very different than what we see within most civil rights movements or most movements and activations for change. But it's still a very real thing. It's hard to be outside of the identity of a Black trans person and be able to unpack your identity so much so that you understand the ways that you need to show up to incite that change for Black trans vitality and Black trans life and restoration and so on and so forth. And because Molasses is completely comprised of Black trans individuals, I feel that, and I know that we've been able to do work that reshapes the histories and the stories and the realities of, Black trans individuals relying on others to advocate for their own, existences. And doing that for ourselves has become completely and utterly revolutionary in so many ways. And that, personally, to me, is why Black trans empowerment and the uplifting of Black trans livelihoods is so important. Because if we do not listen to these individuals who are experiencing these very intersectional identities in terms of how they exist within, not only Blackness, but transness, and then womanhood at the same time, and how the system, as we know, is built upon the diminishing and the oppressing of all these individual categories of identity, And when that is all centralized upon one group of individuals, how impossible that can be to, even have your voice heard, right? To even be honored or acknowledged as individuals who deserve rights or freedom or, restoration of power. In terms of restoration and advocacy, personally, I see, and I feel like this is entirely because of, 21st century and invoking sort of an instant gratification within the activism individuals do in terms of how we interact with Black trans people and how we interact with like Black trans activism. I like to call it Instagram activism, the sharing of a post, the donating directly to Black trans people, which is very, very important, don't get me wrong. But I find that the activism that individuals go through and the lengths at which they go to incite change for Black trans individuals is very stout. It doesn't look into the far reaches of what they can possibly do to incite, Black trans revolution, Black trans change, and things of that nature. And it is disappointing to see time and time again. And for that reason specifically, I always love to have conversations and love to experience, the knowledge and the work and the history that, other elders in terms of, Black organizing and Black activism have gone to, because, the advent of the internet was not around. Everything was in person. Everything was sort of, incited within, the physical confines of how we can manifest and incite change and come together and so on and so forth. And it really disconnects individuals from how we can actually incite community physically with individuals who are around us consistently. And I feel like Molasses has become essential in refuting that and upturning that in this city specifically, because we are, physically creating spaces for Black trans individuals, physically being able to bring Black trans people together and incite change in this really, really intrinsically important way that Black trans people haven't been able to access before. And the reason that Black trans people haven't been able to access before is because they haven't been given the opportunity, one, but the individuals who hold those opportunities, who hold those spaces, are usually not able to acknowledge their privilege and their power, which is essential for all individuals to do, especially those who are existing within activism spaces, who are existing within spaces of like inciting change or reform or so on and so forth. And I feel that personally existing within Molasses and existing within this beautiful conglomerate of Black trans individuals has even challenged me to look at myself and acknowledge like the privileges and the power that I hold and how I have to utilize that to upset the systems at work that, formulate oppression. Like me existing within my identity as a Black trans woman who, is not within the 1% of like wealth, who is existing, has existed as a sex worker as well, who, although all those things are true, I still hold privileges within, being a light-skinned woman and so on and so forth, and how we look at these things and how we acknowledge the powers and the privileges that we hold individually, even as marginalized individuals, even as, individuals who may be experiencing oppression in different ways, and how we can utilize those things and those privileges and those powers to, again, upset and upturn the systems at hand that weigh down upon the individuals at the bottom. And when I say at the bottom of that system, I'm specifically referencing dark-skinned non-men who are commonly left out of spaces of activism, who are left out of spaces of, being heard and being honored and having their voices uplifted and so on and so forth. So we end up in these rooms constructed of, individuals who are speaking about them, but not uplifting their voices and letting them be heard and so on and so forth. And even beyond, and including the identities of dark-skinned non-men, there are disabled folks and neurodivergent folks and non-normalized bodies and fat folks as well. And again, sex workers and folks with chronic illnesses. And I feel that, the instant gratification of easy activism, of Instagram activism, forgets about all these individuals and does the easy thing of uplifting the individuals who are the most easily consumed or viewed or perceived by society. And the reason that they're easily perceived or consumed is because of that system of white supremacy that looms over us. And that's why I consider Molasses to be something so beautiful and so powerful. And it's work to acknowledge all of the systems at play that create, oppression as a whole within America. And also just being able to, acknowledge the power and privilege that even marginalized individuals have as like Black trans people. Because although like I am a Black trans woman and there are other Black trans individuals within Molasses, there are individuals existing within that same identity who have to experience different systems of repression, who will never have the opportunities that we do in terms of uplifting their voices, in terms of being heard. I think
I think the internet maybe is not. Oh, there we go. We can hear you.
Ooh. Oh, amazing. Sorry. I was just saying, I think I hit all my talking points in terms of what I wanted to express. Once again, thank y'all for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak as well. And also just wanted to encourage everyone to
Yeah, she can probably come back maybe in a minute. I think it's just a little spotty.
Oh, am I cutting in and out?
Yes, we can hear you now. Okay, we hear you again.
Okay. Amazing. I'm sorry. Essentially, I was just reiterating to, as individuals who are in culture work, in activism, in artistry, to always remember to acknowledge and always remember to, utilize the privileges that we do hold as individuals in these spaces, to uplift individuals who are also experiencing marginalized identity, who never have these opportunities. Again, so, dark-skinned non-men, disabled folks, so on and so forth, and how we should be utilizing the realities of these individuals who are never heard to uplift them and upset the system. And that is what I feel the work that Molasses does, the work that I will continue to do, and the work that I am excited to see y'all do as well, as individuals who are elders to me and waymakers to me as well, who have already experienced the work and are still doing it today.
Wow.
That's all I have. I hope y'all got that.
Yes, we did. Thank you, Zolita. I love this idea of a restoration of power and inciting change that you brought up during your discussion. And thank you so much for your insight. So next, we're going to be welcoming Keli Stewart. Keli Stewart is a writer, educator, and the owner of Front Porch Art Center located in the Austin community. It is the epicenter of connecting the arts, community, and culture while celebrating the history of West Side of Chicago. Front Porch Art Center creates art programming, which includes workshops, performances, and exhibitions. Keli's poetry collection, Small Altars, is forthcoming from Bronzeville Books in 2021. Are you there, Keli?
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to speak today. It is Sunday, and I hope I'm not like a long-winded preacher, which I am very guilty of being. But I wanted to talk today about a few things, including my on this International Women's Day celebration of that. I want to talk about my grandmother, front porch culture, and just a little bit of the roots of Front Porch Art Center and our work. So also, when I think about my grandmother, okay, just to tell you just a little bit about my grandmother. My grandmother, who is my maternal grandmother, migrated from Mississippi to Chicago in the 50s. And she settled in Lawndale. And so I grew up in a community that had very Southern roots. And my grandmother, although not a artist, she was an artisan of sorts. She was a brilliant cook, a poet of sorts. She taught me how to cuss. She had a knife called Big Bertha. And I grew up sitting on her front porch, listening to the stories of everyone. I saw it as a intergenerational space, a space of celebration, a space of history, a space where you can witness, you can bear witness to and be witnessed, and a space of learning history. And because of that, that's the roots of Front Porch, so to speak, in that I grew up in a culture that was all about the celebration and storytelling that we hope to support through our work. My grandmother also, funny thing about it, when I told her I was going to grad school to study Black studies, she said, well, you can sit out on the porch and learn everything that you need to know about Black people, right? And I went on to grad school to study Black studies. In the study, I found out that there wasn't that much written about the West Side of Chicago. I think that books tend to gravitate towards the South Side. And it, to me, didn't speak of the culture and the community and the story and the place that birthed me. Because of that, well, I had gone on to study Black Studies at UMass Amherst for 6 years with Steve Tracy, John Bracy, Bill Strickland. Just to note, Steve Tracy is a blues man. And as we were studying the blues, he talked about Otha Turner. And I'm like, Otha Turner. I know Otha Turner very well from the stories my grandmother said, who was a blues man that used to steal corn out my great grandfather's field, from his cornfield, right? And so that made me feel a tremendous sense of connection. And that connection has carried over in my writing and my work with Front Porch. Also, I think that, well, let me just start talking about Front Porch, what it is that we do. Well, when you think about the West Side, you know, people are pressed, right, to name the cultural centers that we have. And coming back from grad school, you know, I'm seeing that even some of the spaces that supported me as an early artist, like Frontline Books, I would go right up the street to the bookstore and hang out and hear stories and learn so much of history in a very Afrocentric rooted place. Also Africa West, which was a celebrated cafe and spoken word scene. So, you know, coming back from grad school and wanting to help to create spaces, art spaces, or art that could be supported publicly supported. A publicly supported art center is what our goal is. Currently, right now, we have a few projects that we are working on, and that includes a mural project. We have 3 murals, and I could just talk a little bit about where those are. We have one mural located on California and Madison, which is right across the street from the Chairman Fred Hampton mural. If any of you all know about the West Side, I know you've seen that mural. Um, that space is Wallace's Catfish Corner, which, although is only a restaurant, it's really not only a restaurant. It served as a blues center on the west side of Chicago. All the blues folks traveled to uh, Wallace's Catfish Corner and the Delta Fish Market. And so that is a cultural center of sorts. We hope to celebrate that history by having a mural on that wall that does so. Celebrates that history as well as speaks to where we're heading on the West Side and some of the great movement and that is going on right now. Another wall that we have is off of Warren and Western. We're going to dedicate that wall to Nancy B. Jefferson, a West Side activist who has a post office not too far from there. I didn't even know that. It just so happened. And I think that is just like awesome because we feel as though, we want to see and we need to see people who have done this work up on walls. We need to see the beauty that we are, when you think about who is at the forefront of creating culture, why that's the Black masses. And who's on the West Side but the Black masses, So we have another wall that is right across from the 11th District Police station. And that's a huge wall that we hope to be in conversation with some of the political conversation that's had right now. I would love to see something up on that wall. And we're working with artists right now that could be in conversation with the police. Every time they step outside, it's a 45-foot wall. So that, in addition, right now we're also working with the Chicago Sinfonetta on a event called West Side Classic, which documents the stories of elders. We're so excited about this. It's going to be a great event, and it's a part of the West Side Theater Festival, which stay tuned about. There'll be more information about that. West Side Classic is an opportunity for us to engage with the elders and to document their stories, which is a part of what our work is really centered on, trying to document the stories and the narratives that are undocumented. So we're so excited about that work. And also, I can just talk. Oh, that's with Bethel New Life. Bethel New Life, which is a nonprofit on the West Side that serves seniors. So I'm excited about that partnership. And in addition, the West Side Theater Festival has just a few, uh, it's a few events grouped into one festival, which also includes a screening of ground rhythm dance, a partnership with Fifth City Revisited, which I am the assistant director of. Shout out to Meida Mcneal. In addition to a panel, uh, two panels. The first one with the West Side Writers Guild, a guild that I found out about. I found their anthology on the store shelf of a secondhand store many years ago, before I even knew that there was a guild. And they were in existence in the early 90s. So we're going to have a panel with them in addition to a reading. And our other panel is going to be about house music and footwork on the west side of Chicago. Once again, just wanted to document our stories, share who we are, and create spaces for us to be artistic, Yeah. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Keli. That was wonderful. I love stories about grandmothers. You can never tell me too many stories about grandmothers. I also love this idea of Black masses as the culture creators. I'm a firm believer in that. Thank you for that, Keli. So now we will be bringing up our last speaker of this event. So this is Alexie Young. Alexie Young is an artist, painter, owner of Art West Gallery that is rebranding the West Side with arts and culture. She developed the Art West Gallery Tour, which explores local galleries and highlights the culture of the Austin, North Lawndale, East and West Garfield Park. Additionally, the gallery aims to expand opportunities for local artists and entrepreneurs. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that this worked out. Thank you so much for having me today. And it is such an honor to sit with so many amazing women and hear the voices of individuals who are doing amazing work. So, I definitely would like to thank you all for paving the way. I do feel that I am a newbie to the scene of the Chicago arts and culture industry, but I'm really excited to be here today to just talk a little bit about Art West, some of our initiatives and what we are up to, and in light of some of the things that we're up against. So I'd like to first start off with our mission. Again, our mission at Art West is to rebrand the West Side through arts and culture. And it really just stems from an opportunity that we created for ourselves to engage in social experiences that we often had to leave our neighborhood for. Oftentimes, as a creative millennial, myself, a lot of my peers, we would typically go to Bronzeville, we would travel to Wicker Park, all the other parks and all the other neighborhoods to enjoy the amenities, the cultural amenities that are available in those spaces. And we, at some point, decided, what can we start to create ourselves for ourselves so that we can create some sense of solutions in terms of access to social engagement. We didn't realize that that social engagement and having that platform would brew something that just created this really beautiful, organic grassroots collective. And from there, we were able to identify some things that we wanted to tackle. So the very first thing I would say is the genesis of Art West was the Art West gallery tour. The irony here is that now that we have a space of our own, a gallery of our own, that's great. But how we started off is we did not have a space of our own. I formerly was the operations director over at the MLK Exhibit Center. And through that work that I had done there, really was just about bringing more people into the space, building visibility. And, you know, once people recognized that Dr. King had a very strong history here on the west side of Chicago in the 1960s, and that he actually lived on Hamlin and 16th Street for, you know, a number of months while being here to campaign for housing equality. And what I really enjoyed through that work is discovering new people who were also in this space of discovery. They hadn't known about the history of Dr. King on the west side as much. And so to have people come into North Lawndale and they're coming from all over the city, that sparked something within myself and, you know, a lot of individuals who live, work, and play on the west side. We started to ask this question. If the MLK Exhibit Center had been here for a number of years, since 2012, I believe, and it is now, at that time, it was about maybe 2019. The question that I wanted to pose is, how can we build more visibility for this space, but also other arts and culture spaces on the west side? Because they're here, but oftentimes people don't know what's available, even if it's in their own backyard. So the plan was to gather as many individuals that I could think of who were performing artists, music artists, visual artists, all sorts of creatives that I can possibly think of, and wanting to collaborate with those individuals to create a welcoming and culturally rich experience, and something that would really challenge individuals to get out of their comfort zone and actually move into spaces that they probably would drive by most of the time. Wanted to challenge individuals to walk in and step into those spaces. Maybe they had heard of them before, but they had never taken the opportunity to participate. And so that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on, is increasing participation and increasing visibility, not just for arts and cultural assets in our community, but also for the individuals who are doing the work. So in collaboration with the MLK Exhibit Center, Legendary Art Gallery, and 345 Art Gallery, we had a great opportunity to create a tour that would stop at each of those spaces, and each of those spaces had something different and something beautiful to offer, whether it was a number of performers, food, music, DJs. You know, DJ Mike Dunn was at 345 Gallery, and that was like the kickoff. I mean, that was the culminating venue for that tour. And it was just so powerful to be able to see people from the West Side being able to celebrate the West Side in a way that we typically would have to travel for. So after the tour, the question became, how do we continue this work? What are the next steps? And so, again, Art West is a very young brand. And my position in this brand as the owner and founder is understanding that I have had some challenges as an artist myself, as someone who was an event curator for a long time. I remember having access to space was one of the biggest issues that I ran into. And when I found beautiful spaces, they typically were not in my neighborhood. And they also had rates that were so high that it would cut into my profit margin. So understanding as we move forward in the work that we're doing to create spaces for accessibility to curators and artists and creatives, is understanding that at the end of the day, I know what it feels like to do all that work and just break even. So how can we impact the economic development for creative professionals, and respecting them enough to understand that there are opportunities to provide a great service and a great space here on the West Side. So found myself wanting to find a space close to home. Again, going back to this concept of living and working, live, work, and play on the West Side, rebranding what play means for us. So events such as art shows, social events that are just literally, we're listening to some of the best music that Chicago artists have produced. So some listening parties, just getting really creative on how we can curate experiences that are lasting and worth the while, especially for those who, again, have typically had to leave the neighborhood and spend their money in other places. So the interest in acquiring a space came along, and I'd say probably summer 2020, right as COVID started to shift and we were able to do more engagement. An opportunity to open a space in October came about for us. And it was a really exhilarating experience, obviously. Going from being an entrepreneur and I'm hopping around to spaces, I'm looking for places to call home, to build a collective of individuals who also need a space and just want a safe space to enjoy a sense of belonging, to expand a network of artists, to skill share, to troubleshoot. Where was that space for us? And so as we opened the Art West Gallery in October, the welcome was so strong. The engagement was so strong. And unfortunately, we were impacted by the second shutdown. But since then, we have continued to increase our engagement strategies. One of the ways that we were able to do that is the Art West Freedom Festival. Last year, we were able to engage that strategy by hosting a week-long online virtual festival, which was absolutely fabulous. Had an opportunity to collaborate with Next Showcase Chicago. And we were able to feature over 20 artists in a week, performing artists. And it was really an opportunity to engage not just artists from the West Side of Chicago, but from all over the city. And also we had an opportunity to make sure that we were intentional in sharing information for whether it was health and wellness, economic development workshops. We had all sorts of workshops that took place during the day while we made sure to curate a very intentional music hour each night of that week. So I'm really excited about that work because that was supported by Mars Wrigley, and really just kind of started to push us into a new space of ideas. So I want to talk about, as I did mention, a couple of the projects that we had previously, which is the Art West Tour, and the Art West Tour and the Art West Freedom Festival. Want to talk about a couple of future ambitious projects that we're planning to launch really soon. Number one is the curatorial membership. So at our space, it's only 1,200 square feet right now. The goal is to work through equitable development. So as we are moving into developing new spaces, potentially owning a property of our own rather than leasing. That would be something that would, you know, I'm putting my prayers up for that. But through those initiatives, our goal is to launch curatorial memberships, which is an opportunity for curators, creative professionals, and instructors to have access to a space. They would pay a monthly fee and they would host their workshops or they would host their events, but then also having that co-working space available to them, but also, again, building out that network of creative professionals. Again, our goal is that skill sharing and organic relationships is really what pushes our brand really far. But also like the people, it's all about the people who are doing the work. And just knowing we want them to feel supported, you know. I think that is one of the things that has allowed me to thrive in this industry so far, is that I've had so much support. And when I have questions, you know, I've been able to call Keli, Stewart. I've been able to have conversations with Meida. And, you know, this is just the beginning. Because the goal is that I want the entire city of Chicago to recognize that the talent is here on the West Side. There are people who take pride in fellowship. They take pride in community work. They take pride in their history here. And it's also a very blessed opportunity to take pride in what the future of the West Side could look like, what it can feel like. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. Because when I talk about not just the curatorial memberships, because again, we're thinking about ways to provide solutions, which is access to space, rates that are affordable so that it doesn't cut into profit margins as much as some of the, you know, more traditional event spaces typically do. Our plan is also to continue with our tours. We were not able to do one in 2019, but we are super excited about what type of engagement, creative engagement we can do this year, because we know COVID is still prevalent. So we want to keep people safe, but we definitely still want to keep increasing the visibility of the work that's happening on the West Side, especially in the arts and culture industry. Our goal also is to create a Creative Career Youth Summit so that we can start to expose young people to the expansive industry of arts and culture. We want young people to know that it's not just about, you know, a mural. While murals are so powerful and beautification is absolutely necessary, and the messages that are developed through murals, you know, a lot of times when we talk about community development, you know, that's the first thing they're asking for is murals. And I say yes to that all day. I say yes to making sure that we're contracting artists to do the work, making sure that those artists have equitable opportunities, but also it is so much more to creative career pathways. And we have to start to expose our young people to that so that they can see that as a viable and feasible pathway to pursue. You have video, you have film, you have photography, you have so many areas that young people can, you know, start to develop now, build interest in those areas, and really thrive as they become professionals in their fields. So we want to expose young people to the people that look like them, who are doing the work and who are thriving in those industries. So definitely excited about that. And then last but not least, I don't want to continue talking too much, but I do want to just leave you all with two things that you know, really kind of helps us shape and form what Art West is. Again, as a woman who was born in LA to a Belizean family, raised on the West Side of Chicago, I've never lived anywhere else. When I came to Chicago, I've never lived anywhere else. So all that I know is the West Side. And, you know, when I would walk into stores, when I'd walk into the gas station and I'd ask for something, or, you know, I'd exchange a small conversation, the assumption was always that there's no way that I could have been from the West Side. it was like, oh, are you sure you're not from the north side? Like, of course I know where I'm from. I know exactly where I'm from. I'm from the west side. So I've always felt like I needed to represent the power in that, the beauty in that. And so that people can know the west side encompasses all sorts of beautiful people, all sorts of history, and that the west side, who we are, we're the same people that are on the south side. You know, families were split up, you know, as we talk about historical context. But I'm not going to get too deep into that. I just want to leave you all with a couple of things. In terms of Art West as a brand, yes, we do a lot of community work, mutual aid. You know, there's a lot of like social impact work that we do. But some of the things that we really hone in on is, you know, really just displaying arts and culture and a social experience that feels contemporary. So a lot of our branding is coming from a very contemporary feel. We want to really appeal to a generation of people who are, perhaps they're not stakeholders just yet, but they will become stakeholders quite soon. And they're not the opportunity youth. I'm talking more so about many millennials and young adults who, you know, they're interested in social experiences. And those are the things that really shape and form what a community feels like. And that is really what it feels like is, this is going to be on my last note. What it feels like is what keeps people in a community. So when you're talking about population retention, people want to live in places that they love. So when people are coming here to experience Art West or experience the West Side, will they love it? And I think it's our job to show them what the lovable components are in our community. And they can use that as they can use that as an opportunity to feel their way through connecting with other people here. So yeah, I think that that's really what I wanted to leave you all with. And again, the goal for us is to make sure that the whole entire world, not just Chicago, can start to recognize that arts and culture has a place in the world. There's nothing that can exist without art and design and culture and the consumption of the beauty and all of that. And I just want to thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again for inviting me to be a part of this symposium. And I'm really excited about continuing to do the work and collaborating with the other women that I've heard today. Super excited again. So thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alexie. I love the way that we're all thinking in the same realms of multi-generational legacy, like all of these things that we're all talking about, skill sharing, regenerative. I'm really excited about the future for all of us today. I just want to close with reminding us that we are a vessel for power. As one of the wonderful speakers we had last year at International Women's Day, Camilla Rashid said, you are a breaker of barriers. And that's something that has always stayed with me. I also wanted to say, you know, when you get weary, because we all do with doing this work, and when your voice trembles and your eyes fill with tears, know that it is not because you are weak, but because something big is moving through you. Don't be afraid, just follow that inner voice and let it guide you. Going back to Keli and talking about her grandmother, on this Sunday, I hear my grandmother's voice, Reverend Mary T. Weezer, singing a gospel song from when I was a little girl in church. She would sing, "We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved." I want to thank All of my speakers today, Alexie Young, Keli Stewart, Meida Mcneal, Dorian Sylvain, and Zolita. We put everybody's website into the chat and also their IG handles. Please connect with all of these wonderful women that you heard from today. Please check out our website at equityarts.org. We also want to thank everyone for joining us today. As a thank you, we also put a link to a recording of Excursions. If any of you don't know about Excursions, it is a soulful journey through house music that we can use today and whenever we want to celebrate women and celebrate our special day with dance. And we do this every last Saturday of the month, and you can find these recordings of Excursions on Excursions 312 through Twitch and Mixcloud. So I don't know what you're going to be doing today, but we're going to be vibing over here at Heaven Gallery. If you haven't visited Heaven Gallery, we have gallery hours every Friday through Sunday. Today we have hours 1 to 5. I want to thank everyone. Happy International Women's Day and Women's Month. Thank you and enjoy this beautiful weather.
Thank you.